Hey everyone, welcome back to Tech Junior Tutorials. My name's Lee Warwick Jr. and we're doing Advent Code. Today's actually the 29th. I've solved day 25, which we're going to be talking about today, on like just after midnight on the 27th. So it took me a little bit over the 25 days to solve everything. A couple of those days I was not actually coding at all. I was on like vacation and spending time with my family, celebrating Christmas, that sort of thing. So didn't have the time to sit down and do the puzzles. And then some of the other days I was doing multiple puzzles. So for this one I solved day 23, 24, and 25 all in an afternoon. Well, really an evening. So a lot of hard work went into that one. But anyway, let's talk about day 25. So checking out the site, day 25 is Cryostasis. This one is another int code problem, which you can see down here. It says that you finally reach Santa's ship, and then you do a scan, and it seems to be frozen. So you cut open a hole in the side and send in a droid to explore the ship and try and find Santa. So yeah, it says it's negative 40 degrees. But there is signs of life on there somewhere. So again, it runs on int code. The input for this here is the int code program. It has all these numbers, which still blows my mind that you can write a program out of an array of numbers. Yeah, this is kind of crazy. So I know, like, if you go down far enough, if you peel away layers of abstraction, eventually you'll get down to binary, which is just ones and zeros, but you would never think to program in binary, certainly. But, it seems like it's not too far from that because you're just programming in numbers, which is madness, in my opinion. But anyway, we actually built the Encode computer ourselves, and that is the program running on the Encode computer. So again, it's going to communicate with us in ASCII code. So the challenge is partially to be able to input commands to the computer with ASCII and then interpret what comes out of it as ASCII. Luckily, we're using Python, so there's not much challenge to that. I saw somebody on Reddit actually solved this one in Excel. How that would work, I would love to see that guy's video, but that is beyond me. I don't even understand how that would work. But in any case, what it says is for the ASCII computer, you can give it commands. So you give it north, south, east, or west whenever it outputs this word command. And then you can take items from the environment. So it will output some stuff, and then you can take anything you see. So if you wanted to take a red ball, you could type take red ball. You can also drop items. So drop green ball. And then if you want to list everything that you're carrying, you can type INV for inventory. So it says there's no extra spaces or capital letters or anything like that allowed. It says instructions must be precise, but it's really easy to handle that with modern languages. So we can use like strip and trim, strip in Python or trim in JavaScript to remove leading or trailing space. And then we can just call .lower or .to lowercase in Python and JavaScript to lowercase all the letters. And then it says from there you just need to explore until you can find the password for the main airlock so that you can get into the ship. So here is my code for that. Again, the bulk of this is int code, which has been written for most of Advent Code. I think on day 9 we wrote the final int code computer. This little bit here, adding 10,000 zeros, is a cheat by me. Originally this was in int code, but on day 23, day 23, they asked us to run 50 int code computers at the same time. So I realized that every time that I start or stop int code, start or restart int code, I was adding another 10,000 zeros to each one. So what I wanted to do was, instead of doing that every time I run this function, just get the inputs and then add all the padding zeros and then not worry about it after that. So then after that, I wrote a function to manage everything that's going to handle int code. So that function has a couple variables inside of it, and this will be running the entire time that we're playing this game. So it's going to have an output string, user input, which is going to be like what you type, script input, we will talk about in a second, and as well as this commands.script. But the main two functions that we're worried about are inputter, which is going to be passed into intcode because I wrote that as a function that could take functions as arguments, which is a really excellent feature of JavaScript and Python. So they sometimes call that first-class functions or first-class citizens, where functions can behave as variables. So we're able to pass in a function as a variable to this other function. I'm sorry, to intcode itself. So I've got the input method is a function, output method is a function, defaulted to print for debugging, and then index is an optional argument. So inputter is really easy. It just takes that input array or list and pops off the last value. So for outputter, this is like where all the logic lives. This is going to manage user input and the output string. And if it gets an ASCII value of 10, that means that the program has given us a new line character. So instead of like concatenating everything and trying to guess whenever it's done outputting anything, I just want to print whatever is on a line like one at a time. So if I get an ASCII value of 10, I'm just going to print output string. And then once that is done, way down here at the bottom, I reset the output string. In between here, there's some other logic that happens. So if I don't get a value of 10, I'm going to convert that value from ASCII to something that's human readable, unless you're a super nerd and can read ASCII. So I'd get that value and turn it into a letter or a space or whatever, and then concatenate that to the output string. Otherwise, I look for the output string to equal command because they said that in the instructions. So they say they will output this exact string at some point. And I say, okay, if you've given me command, and I am in manual mode, so I added this later, but essentially like I'm going to call Python's input command, which lets the user type in something. And then once I get that input, I'm going to, like we talked about, call strip and lower on it to remove leading spaces or trailing spaces and lowercase it. And then I'm going to turn that into an array of ASCII values by doing a list on a string, pops it into a, like each character becomes an element in the list. And then for each character in the list, I'm going to call ord on it, which turns it into an ASCII character, so a number. And then I'm going to append a new line character, which is 10 in ASCII, and then reverse it. And the reason that I reverse it is because I'm going to be popping up here in the inputter. So if I reverse it, I want the first character to come first. Whereas if I call pop and don't reverse it, I'll get the last character, so the new line character would come first. So we don't want that. And then I set user input to be that new list, and that's pretty much it. So I do have a script that I wrote for this, so this is like the automated answer to it. And this just goes line by line. Whenever there's not an empty line or a line starting with a hashtag for a comment. And so that is going to, instead of asking the user for input, it is going to pop an input off of the script list. And so whenever I first start this up, I read those commands just like I would read. Actually, I went over this in day 21 because I used this for the Spring Code computer. So that read like lines out of a script file and then just converted them to ASCII for the program. This is doing very much the same thing. So I read those lines and split them one by one into a list. And then I say if the line's not empty or it doesn't start with a hashtag, go ahead and call strip and lower on it, and then append that to script inputs and then reverse it. So you get the first input first instead of the last line read first whenever it calls pop. And then once it pops it does all the same stuff as before. So I could probably get away with not calling strip and lower on it here. Maybe we can try and comment that out. And I guess we'll need to open this. This would need to be line. And we need to run this in not manual mode. So there we go, it works. Oops. So go ahead and keep that. It's funny whenever you review your code, how much you can refine things. So anyway, that is the program. And then at the end, I just call run CYA game. So this reminds me of like a text adventure or choose your own adventure game, similar to the books you used to read as a kid, where you go like choose some kind of command and then go to a page or something like that. Also, I think Chrome has one of these built into the console. If you want to Google that, you can play it. I think I remember playing it once or twice. That's a little bit more complicated than this one, but remember, this one's actually running off of this giant array of numbers. So there are some limitations, I'm sure, on how much they could actually write. But this is like still impressive. Maybe not as impressive as the Breakout game, because that actually had legit collision detection, it seemed like. Maybe not. Maybe it was scripted and it was just checking to see if your paddle was in the right spot. But actually, I don't think that's true. I don't know. I'm just kind of theorizing on it. In any case, let's play this thing. So whenever it starts up, there it goes. It prints out all this stuff. So it says, "Hey, you got in from a hole in the floor. To keep your ship from freezing, it's been sealed." And then where do you want to go? So you can type in a command, and it will take you to the next area, and then show you the directions that you can go and any items that are here. I wanted to take the escape pod, because you take the escape pod, you're launched into space. Bye. So there's a lot of Easter eggs in this game. It's pretty funny playing it. It's also pretty tedious once you play it for a little while and map out like everything. So I've got my notes here. You can read my terrible handwriting. So I made a map of directions, like I've seen other people do. And it's just a map of like where the items are, what directions you can go in, and what connects to what. So some of the also, like, if you type a wrong thing, it will say unrecognized command, which is kind of cool because they have error handling built into it. So and then INV says like you can carry what items or what you're carrying. So there's a whole lot of places in the ship. Ooh, there's sand. So let's see. So this was my favorite joke in this. You get to the kitchen and it says everything's freeze dried, and it says there's an infinite loop here. So if you take the infinite loop, here is your output. So it's a pretty funny joke. I don't know what I expected here, but I think this is pretty much what I was expecting. So it outputs the string. You take the infinite loop ad infinitum, which is pretty funny. Otherwise, there's a few more funny jokes in this one. I won't go through all of them and spoil it, but there's a couple of Easter eggs. It's just fun to play it. The tedious part is so like if you go to an area like south and you take this food ration and then go north, east, and east, you get to the security checkpoint. So in order to beat the game, you have to figure out some kind of combination of items to carry to pass the checkpoint. So if you go south, it'll say, hey, you're supposed to be heavier than you currently are. So I'm only carrying the food ration currently. So go west, 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 and take the cake. And then go back. And then south. Now it says I'm lighter, or that I should be lighter than I currently am. So basically from picking up the cake, I've gone over the weight limit, and the food ration had me under the weight limit. So either the combination of the two has made me too heavy, or one of those items is too heavy all by itself. And so you can do something like drop the food ration, and then go south. And then it says, hey, you're still too heavy, but I'm only carrying one item. Therefore, like, the solution does not require the cake. The cake itself makes you heavier than the expected weight limit. So that's the tedious part, is like traversing this entire maze, getting all the items, and then coming back. I think there are about 6 or 7 different items that you can pick up in total. So I thought the solution was going to be to go grab all the items and go to the checkpoint, or at least grab all the items that don't like fail the game, and put you into an infinite loop or eject you from the ship or something. That's not the case. You had to do some tedious stuff, like figure out which combination of items gets you to the exact weight limit to get you through the door. For me, it was, I don't know if these are different per person, but for me, it was the astrolabe, ornament, weather machine, and the food ration, or ration. So that's what I needed to pass the checkpoint. In order to solve this, I wrote, I kind of figured it would take me a long time to trial and error my way through it. So first I wrote a script that grabbed all the items and put me at the security checkpoint, and then I just like did a drop and cake combination until I found the right set of items, which was a little bit, I don't know, not super fun, but the whole thing itself, like the experience, is fun. So after that, I wrote a script to get exactly what I needed, and then return to the checkpoint and beat the game. And so to do that, manual mode is false by default. But so you can see it whips through all of the commands like exactly from the start, and then takes me to the end, and it pops you through. The loudspeaker says, hey, if you want to get in, here's the key code. So put that on the website, and then you move on to part 2. And part 2 is like this very, very Christmassy message where it says, you go through, you talk to Santa. He says he was taking a nap. He's fine. The ship isn't frozen. He just had it set to North Pole temperature. And then you jump over to the navigation console, and it says that you are stranded and you need to supply the measurements from 49 stars to recalibrate. So at that point, once you solve the game, you have 49 stars. And then, so at the very beginning of this, on day 1, they tell you need to get 49 stars to save Santa to recalibrate his navigation system. So Santa just smiles and nods at you, and he points at the sun and says that that is the star that you need for star 50. And then all you have to do is click align the warp drive. So if you click that, you get this awesome CSS animation of snow, which was amazing. And then a nice message from Eric telling us, like, thanks for playing. And he tells you that there are Easter eggs highlighted in each puzzle. So I definitely took this as an opportunity to like inspect some of the CSS. Which is kind of impressive, like to be able to animate snow. That's really cool. Also, the Easter eggs, I was kind of curious how he did that. And he did that by adding a title to the span tags. And so when you hover over it, it gives you the description, kind of like hovering over the alt text or something for a alt text for a an image or something like that. Also, when you go back to the main page now, you get this awesome animation on the calendar, and it has like stars shooting off of the sun, which is kind of neat. And then I guess this is your route from where you started to Santa. I guess from day 2. So you're like traversing this. It's not a constellation, it's like the solar system, and these are all supposed to be planets, I believe. Then you finally reach Santa on day 25. So that's really cool. I really enjoyed that. And then, like he said, he's highlighted all of the Easter eggs from all the puzzles. So like this one tells you that you should have had an astrolabe. You could have done this faster. And lo and behold, that was one of the items that you needed to collect on day 25. So maybe that was like a little hint that he threw in there. But yeah, so that is it for Advent of Code. That is all 25 days. Such an adventure. If we look at the leaderboard, we can look at my personal stats, which are terrible. I got 0 points for every day compared to the first 100 people. So the people were up at like midnight solving these day by day. I was not that dedicated to it. I usually waited till the next day, either in the morning before I went to work or after work. And by that time, the first 100 people had already solved it. As far as private leaderboards, I am on the leaderboard for the Orlando developers. And so there's a couple of people, Matt Shapiro and Jay Swift, that were keeping pace with me for most of Advent of Code, at least halfway. And then life got in the way and they had other things to do, which is, hey, it's like the holidays, so that's expected. But they were a big help in helping me get there, as well as the Coding Blocks Slack channel. So this fellow Edward Keys and Uriel Zauberman helped me out a ton with these puzzles. So whenever I get stuck, I'd say like, hey guys, I'm having this behavior happen. Can you throw me a bone or a hint or something? Because usually they were outpacing me at the end. But if you look at this, like out of all the people that were participating, only a few get to the end. So I feel like this was a major accomplishment to get through all 25 days of Advent of Code. So I'm really proud of that. Joe Zach, who is one of the hosts of Coding Blocks, you can see he only got like 4 days in. He told me that Advent of Code is like one of the hardest sets of coding problems out there. So even being able to finish it with hints and cheats and stuff here and there still feels like a pretty good accomplishment. So I'm not beating myself up too much about getting help on some of the puzzles. But that's all I've got for day 25. Thanks for joining me on this adventure. I'm going to do another video where I have a retrospective and talk about like what I've learned and how this went and my strategies and stuff. So check that out. That'll be coming up next. But yeah, thanks for joining me on Tech Junior Tutorials to talk about Advent of Code and all these coding problems. See you on the next tutorial.